Masamune was a rare land whale who got brutally rejected by his childhood crush, so he spent 8 years working out to become a Chad, becoming the most wanted man in school. Now he will do anything to take revenge on his crush to make her fall in love with him. But it all begins one morning when Masamune stares at his hot body in the mirror, knowing his face card has unlimited credit. Suddenly, his sister, Chinatsu, sees this and points out that he's being shallow, but Masamune insists that this had to be done to prevent him from returning to his fat and ugly self. Just then, their lowly mummy calls them for breakfast, but when Masamune sees her cooking has enough fat to give him a stroke, he passes on eating. After, he heads to school where all the girls gawk at him, proving that you can't be considered human if you're not hot. When he stops to peep at the girls playing tennis, some of them angrily run out but only accuse the nerd in glasses of harassment, while Masamune goes off scot-free. Suddenly, one of the girls recognizes him as the new transfer student, so the other girls gather around him and shower him with attention. Pleased, Masamune activates his Riz and tells them to keep working hard as he walks off. Afterward, Masamune notices a crowd gathering as one of the hottest guys in school gives a love confession to the one they call the cruel princess Aki. There, Aki reveals that the self-absorbed wannabe Chris Hemsworth had recently bought a book about gender swapping and was writing his own story with himself as the main character. Hearing this, the students step back, but as the boy tries to explain himself, Aki adds that he has a single hair growing from the mole on his chest and nicknames him Molio, crushing any steeds he once had. Seeing this, Masamune worries about how scary the trenches of school are when Aki suddenly walks by and gives him the death stare. Later in class, the class rep Tae busts Masamune for sleeping in class, but since he's hot, he gets away with it as usual. Just then, a classmate named Shuri walks in and hands him some bread for lunch. However, when Masamune sees the amount of calories in it, he realizes he'd have to do 100 crunches at home. Shuri praises Masamune for being an all-rounder but not being stuck up, so Masamune thanks him, remembering Shuri is also quite popular with the crowd that calls him the designated bottom. However, Shuri points out that there's one person as accomplished as him in the school. Just then, Aki walks in looking for a certain student. When no one responds, she grabs Masamune by his tie and demands an answer. The simp in question identifies himself, so Aki reads out his love letter and roasts him for being a creep. She then nicknames him Jabba the Hutt and rips his letter, along with his dignity, to shreds. When she leaves, Shuri explains that Aki is just like Masamune, except her personality stinks worse than your gym socks. Tai then adds that she hates guys and gives them cruel nicknames when they confess to her, which is why they call her the Cruel Princess. When she mentions that she's the daughter of the Adagaki group, Masamune instantly recognizes the name and runs to the hallway, realizing he's finally found his arch-nemesis. Later, at lunch, Aki gets offered a ton of desserts from her lackeys as Masamune watches her to gather information. He wonders how Aki isn't hated by the girls too, but Shuri explains that most of them think she's cool because she's blunt, but the one who is always with her is Yoshino, the airhead. Masamune asks Shuri has any more information, but the only thing he knows is that she likes to eat lunch alone. At that moment, Aki steps away from the group and Masamune watches as she sends Yoshino off on an errand. Masamune plans to investigate why she eats alone, but Shuri warns that he might get cooked worse than Drake if he gets caught. Masamune insists he'll be fine and runs off to look for Aki. Unfortunately, after looking through the entire school, he can't seem to find her anywhere. Just then, he spots Yoshino and remembers she's Aki's handbag. When he sees her looking extra sus, he decides to follow her and they end up at the gym storage room. Masamune eavesdrops as Yoshino presents Aki with her lunch, but when a spider drops down in front of him, he freaks out and gives himself away. Masamune apologizes for having all the red flags of a stalker, explaining that he had no idea Aki would be there. He then spots her worrisome high-calorie meal but assures her it's not that big a deal till he spots the empty trays of food and realizes this is a pig-out session. When Aki's tummy rumbles, she quickly explains that she can't help being a gluttonous pig, and since the doctors couldn't find any parasites in her, she just has to keep eating. Masamune tries to leave, so Aki warns that if he tells anyone about it, he'll regret it. From then on, it seemed Masamune was the only boy who was able to get close to the prickly queen herself. One day during volleyball practice, Shuri points out how friendly he's become with Aki and how everyone thinks the cruel princess might actually crack this time. However, Masamune explains that Aki has actually rejected all of his advances and been mean to him. Just then, Masamune notices Aki through the window and wonders how she can stuff so much junk in such a tiny hole, but when she catches him staring, she tells him to go back to his doghouse. Suddenly, the volleyball hits Masamune right in the head, and while the girls gather to check on him, some sore loser whispers to him to not get full of himself. After school, Aki and Yoshino say goodbye to their other friends, so Aki tells Yoshino to go get her some more food. Yoshino obeys and runs off, leaving Aki alone. When she starts to take too long, Aki plans to check on her, when she runs into the pudding prince. Angered, he grabs her hair and accuses her of accepting Masamune just because he's hot. He then pulls out a pair of scissors to teach her a lesson, so Aki closes her eyes, expecting the worst, but when she opens them, Masamune is right there, stopping the scissors with his bare hands. Pudding Prince runs off, so Masamune makes sure Aki is okay. He figures Aki couldn't possibly be nasty to him now that he knows his secret and saved her. At that moment, Masamune remembered how he used to look like a walking Oreo and got bullied for it. Back then, Aki was practically Masamune's savior until he confessed his love, and she called him a pig's foot. From then on, Masamune has hated Aki's guts, which is why he now plans to do whatever it takes to make her fall in love with him, so he can dump her sorry behind. The next day at school, Masamune walks up to Pudding Prince, who apologizes for hurting his hand. Masamune accepts and heads to his locker, but when he opens it, a note falls out calling him Pig's Foot. Later in class, Masamune tries to figure out who could have sent the letter. He figures it can't be Aki since she likes to roast her victims publicly, but he can't think of any other suspects. Shuri and Taya ask if he's doing okay, so Masamune assures them he's fine when he suddenly hears some students talking about Pig's Foot in their lunch, which almost gives him a heart attack. At that moment, Masamune swears never to relive that dark time from his past, thinking that if the truth ever gets out, everyone will treat him like a cursed object. Later in class, the teacher catches Masamune spacing out again, so he sheds a tear and claims he was just that moved by the story. After class, Masamune remembers how he had to change his name and the 8 years of torture he endured from his grandfather to lose his weight. He worries that all his efforts would be undone if he doesn't figure out who sent the letter when he suddenly sees a mob of hungry students rush to the school shop. Just then, Yoshino shyly walks up and tries to push past the crowd to buy some food, but she gets pushed back and ends up flashing Masamune her full moon. Masamune goes to check on her, so Yoshino claims she's dead now and hands Masamune the list of Aki's food to buy. Masamune agrees and manages to cut through the crowd to get the food, so Yoshino takes her time counting through the buns to make sure they're correct. When she tries to leave, Masamune asks if she can go with her to see Aki, but Yoshino tries to run off, causing Masamune to pin her to the wall. When Yoshino starts to tear up, Masamune backs off and tries to explain himself. After, they head to the storage room, and Masamune figures that Yoshino is just like Cinderella getting bullied by her wicked stepmother. Yoshino heads to the storage room to deliver her food, and when Aki starts making out with her sandwich, Yoshino heads out to buy some tea. Masamune then steps in and claims he's just dropping by to see how she's doing, but gets his answer when he sees the empty plates of food. Aki asks how his hand is, so Masamune plays it cool and says it just stings a bit. Aki tells him she didn't plan to get him involved and can barely look him in the eye. So Masamune figures she couldn't possibly be the one who sent the pig foot letter. Just then, Yoshino returns and trips into cheek-flashing position, so Aki freaks out and almost pokes Masamune's eyes out. After Yoshino serves Aki her drinks, she hands one to Masamune, who's surprised by how nice she is. Aki laments that Yoshino is too humble and should be so nice to everyone, so Masamune stares at her like she just called anime cartoons. Masamune agrees that even he can't be nice to everyone, but when Aki asks what that's supposed to mean, Masamune says he wants her to rely on him more than she relies on Yoshino. When Masamune leaves the storage room, he figures Aki must be turning bright red, which means his plan is working. He had learned all of his riz from cheesy romance mangas and planned to move forward with his plan. Later, on the way home from school, Masamune stepped into a trap and got captured by Yoshino, who asked if he was trying to get back at Aki for calling him Pig's Foot. Suddenly, Masamune remembers his picture with Aki and realizes Yoshino was in the background. Yoshino then cuts him down as she explains that her family has served Aki's family for generations. Masamune realizes he's been caught red-handed, so he tells Yoshino to laugh if she wants, but he insists he has no regrets about trying to give Aki a taste of her own medicine. To his surprise, Yoshino tells him to carry on and offers to help him. The next day, Masamune watches Aki and her lackeys again, so he decides that he can't possibly trust Yoshino since she might be leading him into a trap. He then plans to become email buddies with Aki on his own. Just then, Taa runs up to him to check if he's still having trouble adjusting to the school, so Masamune decides to help her with her errand so he can practice asking for emails. However, when he sees he has 0 contacts stored, Masamune's confidence plummets to 0, and he runs back to class. There he asks Shuri if sharing email addresses means the other person will find out the number of contacts they have. Shuri says it doesn't, so Masamune calms down and tries to think of a situation where it wouldn't be awkward to ask for Aki's contact. Tai suddenly announces that the school beautification committee has lost a member, and they'll need someone to fill in, so Masamune quickly volunteers. After school, Aki is surprised to see his stupid face there, but when the other girls start fawning over him, Aki walks away and ignores him. Later, Masamune is stuck on window wiping duty and laments how tough Aki is to impress. He then worries that no one would ever want to go out with him if they find out he was built like a truck tire some years ago. As he looks down, Tai walks in and apologizes for pushing something stressful on him. Masamune assures her it's fine, so she walks up and asks if he would like to go to the movies sometime. Masamune's virgin mind begins to picture the wonders of a first date, but when he remembers his revenge, he turns Ta down. Tai says she understands and runs out of the class. It then hits Masamune that he's actually popular, which gives him an ego boost. Just then, Aki shows up and asks if the girl that left was on the committee. Masamune explains that she just wanted to talk to him, so Aki sarcastically tells him it must be nice to be so popular. Masamune sees that his plan is working and tells her the only person he wants to go out with is her. Aki surprisingly thanks him, so Masamune takes the chance to ask for her contact. Aki agrees easily, but she says her phone is getting repaired and asks that they exchange contacts the next time they're on duty. Masamune agrees, but the week after, he's left waiting alone like a fool. He then notices a letter that tells him where to find the next clue. From there, he follows the trail all over the school till he ends up right back where he started and looks out the window. There, Aki reveals a sign that says she declines and walks off. Suddenly, Yoshino appears behind him and tells him how naive he is. She explains that she could easily set him up with Aki and gives him her phone number to prove it. The next day, Todd announces that the whole class will have to take supplementary classes if there's even just one failing grade on their next test. Tai figures Masamune would have it easy, but Masamune points out that Shuri doesn't appear worried at all. At this, Shuri smiles and reveals that he only managed to get single digits on all his midterms and hopes he can get double digits this time. Masamune had no idea that Shuri was as stupid as he sounded, so he offered to help him study. Later at the study hall, Masamune asks Shuri what he knows, but when Shuri already gives up, Masamune wonders what kind of sucking he had to do to get into this school. At this, Shuri proudly explains that he's one of the 7 wonders of the school when Masamune hears a similar conversation happening behind him. He then realizes Aki is also helping Yoshino to study, and Masamune is surprised that Yoshino's airhead act was not an act. Aki mocks Masamune for being confident in teaching someone when he fell for something so simple. At this, Masamune remembers his conversation with Yoshino, and since he figures she's on his side, he suggests they make a wager to see if he and Shuri will score higher than Aki and Yoshino. He insists that if he wins, Aki will have to go on a date with him. When Aki asks what's in it for her, Masamune says she can give him any nickname she wants and he'll wear it on his back till he graduates. Interested, Aki adds that he'll also have to pay for her lunch till she says it's enough, so Masamune agrees. Shuri asks Masamune if it was really a good idea, but Masamune figures that with Yoshino's help, this would be 3 against 1. Later, Aki watches Yoshino study, so Yoshino informs her that Masamune was the first person to get perfect score on their transfer exam. Yoshino suddenly feels less confident, so Yoshino hands her a book about dating in case it comes down to it. Aki gets flustered, but she tells Yoshino it wouldn't happen even if Thanos snapped into existence. Meanwhile, Masamune stares at his phone, wondering if he should call Yoshino, but when he realizes it's his first time calling a girl, he wonders if he should waste it on a blockhead. Thankfully, Yoshino calls him first, so he picks up and asks if she'll help him with the wager. However, Yoshino tells him she can't since he just made the wager on the spot and she already had her own plans. The next day, Shuri shows Masamune yet another single-digit grade, so he promises that if all else fails, he'll get Aki to give him an embarrassing nickname too. Then Aki and Yoshino walk up, so Aki begins to quiz Masamune on possible test questions and he answers every single one without stuttering. Masamune realizes they are pretty much even, which means it will come down to their abilities. After, he continues to tutor Shuri, who struggles to stay awake. One evening, Aki even spots Masamune teaching Shuri in a cafe and is stunned by how far he would go for that date. The day of the tests, Masamune asks Shuri if he thinks he'll make it, so Shuri tells him they're in the clear thanks to Masamune. Shuri then suggests they have lunch, so Masamune goes to get some drinks. When he arrives at the vending machine, he finds Yoshino, who tells him she's sorry she couldn't help. Masamune then admits it was weird to rely on her for a fight he started, so Yoshino offers him her drink and tells him to do his best on the tests. Masamune then wonders why Yoshino would be cheering him on, so she mumbles that it doesn't matter anymore as she runs off. After, Masamune prepares to eat the lunch his mom made as he wonders what that was about. Later, the test finally begins and Masamune smirks as he sees the questions he anticipated. However, he suddenly feels the rumbling in his tummy. He flashes back to when Yoshino said it didn't matter anymore and worries that the two-faced witch laced his coffee with laxatives. As he writhes in pain, he swears not to let the girls get away with it. After the test, Masamune angrily storms over to Aki's class but ends up reaching for the wrong girl. When he says he was looking for Aki, the girl tells him Aki didn't show up to school because she had a fever. Masamune then wonders why Yoshino would give him laxatives if they had already won when he gets a text from his sister, telling him that the eggs in the lunch were basically poison. Some days later, Shuri tells Masamune to do his best in the supplementary classes, so Masamune wonders how he's the only one that got stuck in supplementary class when he spots Aki waiting in class already. As he sits right beside her, he figures that already counts as a date. The next Sunday, Masamune heads out for the real date, remembering the call with Yoshino telling him Aki was willing to do it. However, when Masamune arrives at the spot for the date, he sees Aki in a magical girl cosplay and wonders why on earth she's wearing it. Just then, a sweaty otaku walks up to her and asks if he can take her picture of her costume, but Aki has no idea what the creep is talking about. Masamune comes to her rescue, which chasing the loser away, then Aki gives him the nickname Acid Rag for being a disgusting man. Masamune asks why she's dressed like a character from a coloring book, so Aki mocks him for being inexperienced and not knowing they should wear a costume on the first date to break the ice. After this, Masamune calls Yoshino and asks how on earth Aki ended up like that, so Yoshino explains that Aki believes everything she says or does, which is why Masamune should leave it up to her. Masamune asks why she would go so far to help him, but Yoshino tells him she has to go and hangs up. Masamune returns to the date and admits to not knowing the rules of the first date, but points out that Aki thinks it's a real date. At this, Aki explains that Yoshino had told her that after he failed his test, it found him trying to slit his wrists, and Yoshino said she was the only one who could save him. Masamune wonders how Aki fell for a plot worse than a Fast and Furious movie, but they continue with the date. They head to the cinema that Aki rented out, but she tells him not to sit too close to her. The movie turns out to be a disturbing horror movie, and by the end, Aki has trouble standing up. Next, they go for dinner, and Masamune wonders how she can stuff her face after such a movie. He then remembers that the cruel queen he used to know was way more arrogant, but she didn't eat an entire family's week's worth of food in a sitting. He asks if it was something she was born with, so she explains that it started when something awful happened in her past. Just then, a little girl walks up and asks Aki why she looks like she has a little lamb. Aki then makes a scene as she tries to explain herself, so Masamune drags her out before she embarrasses herself some more. Outside, Masamune finally tells Aki that the cosplay icebreaker wasn't a real thing. Aki gets sad, so she heads into a nearby store to get changed. While she's in there, she realizes how embarrassed she is and screams out, causing Masamune to storm in on her in her underwear. Aki then punches him into a coma, where he relives the memories of when he met her. Later, Masamune wakes up on Aki's lap as he lies on a park bench. When Aki realizes he's awake, she pushes him off and says she's going home, but before she leaves, Masamune apologizes for scaring her. On the way home, Masamune calls Yoshino, who tells him that she's helping him for Aki's sake. She figures she might become more modest if Masamune dumped her, which would also benefit her. Masamune then points out that her head and lap plan was a bit much, but when Yoshino says she doesn't know what he's talking about, Masamune simply tells her he's looking forward to working with her and calls her master. Later at home, Masamune reads some brain-rot romance manga where the main character tells his ugly crush that he doesn't mind getting drenched in rain if he pretends it's from her. When he heads to school the next day, he plans to make his revenge a reality with his next scheme. During supplementary classes, Masamune sits right beside Aki and keeps staring at her. Aki gets irritated and asks why he's still staring, so he says he only has eyes for her in the cringiest way possible. After school, it starts to rain, and Aki doesn't have an umbrella, so Masamune hands her his umbrella, saying he doesn't mind getting drenched in rain if he pretends he's swimming inside her ocean. He then runs off thinking his love-bombing plan is working. That evening, Yoshino breaks the news that Aki only thinks he's being a creep, so she suggests it's time for him to mix things up and tells him to be as cold as possible the next time he sees her. When Yoshino returns to the mansion, Aki wonders what took her so long, but Yoshino continues to play dumb as she notices Masamune's umbrella. Meanwhile, Masamune consults his Riz Bible and sees that the girl typically realizes how she feels when the boy treats her like dirt, but he worries that Aki might hate him even more if he does. The next day, when Masamune spots Aki, he remembers Yoshino's words and decides to trust her. Aki tries to hand him back his umbrella, but he walks past her coldly. When he settles in class, he realizes he might have destroyed all the likability he had built up to that point, but he continues to see it through and ignores her for the rest of the day. After school, Masamune comes face to face with Aki and figures she must be missing his cringe one-liners by now, but she ignores him too. He then tries to chase after her, but Yoshino's eyes warn him not to make a move. From then, Aki and Masamune continue to ice each other out, but Yoshino notices Aki getting more frustrated as the days go by. One evening, Aki finally confronts Masamune in full-on cruel princess mode. Masamune tries to run for the hills when Aki stones him with his umbrella and blocks him from getting away. Masamune finally breaks free and runs, but Aki yanks him by the tie and chews him out for being brain dead. But when she calms down, she asks why he's been ignoring her. Masamune almost gets rizzed up by her shy face, but he sticks to the plan and tells her it was on purpose. Aki asks why he would do that, but before Masamune can say that he likes her, Aki demands to know what he likes about her. All Masamune can think of are the things that make her the devil incarnate, so he simply says he likes everything about her. Aki's barely convinced, so Masamune suddenly runs off to call Yoshino before he screws it up even further. That evening, Masamune begs Yoshino to help him think of something to say, so the next day, Masamune shows up with a letter so his big mouth can't screw it up. Before he can slip it into her locker, Aki shows up, grabs the letter, and tosses it in the trash. She tells him she despises him and stops him from explaining himself as she runs off. Yoshino comes out of the shadows like Batman, so Masamune explains that Aki had been acting completely different from before. Hearing this, Yoshino tells him to leave it to her, explaining that nothing he says will get through to her since he can't even explain why he likes her. After Yoshino leaves, Masamune wonders whose revenge this is and decides that he couldn't possibly sit this one out. Meanwhile, Aki sits in a playground, panicking since she's never skipped class. She then blames Masamune for getting into her head as she remembers how she saw him talking to Yoshino after he ditched her. Aki then tosses his umbrella as she laments knowing it would turn out like this. Just then, Yoshino shows up and asks Aki if she is sad that she was talking to Masamune. Aki gets defensive and claims she couldn't possibly be sad over a cocky narcissist. However, when Yoshino holds her face to comfort her, Aki realizes that she's somehow always been so sharp when it comes to these kinds of things. Regardless, she insists that she'll never be sad over a guy again as she remembers the last time she was. As Aki goes on her delusional rant, Yoshino assures her that Masamune only has eyes for her and figures that Aki must like him too. Aki tries to deny it, but when she turns back, Yoshino is gone. After Aki walks home angrily and admits that she's always hurt people, so she wouldn't get hurt, but now she can't tell if Masamune likes her. Suddenly, Masamune calls out for Aki as a car almost flattens her like a pancake. Thankfully, he grabs her in time and asks what's gotten into her. Aki insists he doesn't care, but Masamune says he doesn't know what he'd do without her. At that moment, Aki lets her guard down and is about to tell Masamune how she feels when they're interrupted by the owner of the car who almost made her roadkill. Suddenly, the girl jumps into Masamune's arms and tells him she's been longing to see him. Masamune wonders who the hot nut job is as she announces that meeting him is all she prays for night and day. When she gets his name right, Masamune wonders what the heck is going on, but he tells her she must have the wrong person. Just then, her butler tells her it's time to go, so the girl hopes to see him soon and leaves. Suddenly, Masamune feels Aki's deadly aura behind him as she asks who the girl is. When Masamune says he doesn't know, Aki tells him to die and walks off. The next day at lunchtime, Masamune goes through the lunch craze just to get Aki her favorite orders. After, he takes them to the gym storage room, thinking she couldn't possibly refuse food, but before he can get closer, Yoshino shows up and starts shooting at him on Aki's orders. She then asks what he could have possibly done to make Aki this mad, so Masamune explains the weird situation with the girl. Yoshino shoots at him some more and reminds him he wasn't supposed to interfere, then she runs off mysteriously. Masamune figures he'll do things his way and tries to plan his speech to Aki, but when he pictures her as Darth Vader, he can't bring himself to enter and just leaves the food by the door. Once he leaves, the door opens and Aki grabs them. The next day at school, Masamune continues to wonder who the strange girl is and realizes she's actually his type. However, he laments over Aki not giving him a chance to explain. Just then, a new transfer student walks in, and it turns out to be Neko, who immediately smiles at Masamune. When Neko goes to her seat, the whole class gawks at how majestic she is. After class, Masamune tries to talk to Neko, but all the girls surround her and ask about her former school. He waits until after the next class, but the same thing happens again and for the rest of the day. Eventually, the other boys get mad that the girls keep hobbing Neko up, so they try to send Shuri to infiltrate the gang, but Masamune volunteers to go instead. When Masamune walks up, the girls can't believe how perfect his timing is, so Tad explains that Neko just revealed that she transferred to their school because of him. The girls encourage her to express her feelings, so Neko explains that 3 years ago she stood in the cold call-in for donations, but everyone ignored her like she was selling tickets to the 4th Thor movie. However, Masamune was the only one to hand her a jacket and make a donation. When she called out after him, he simply told her to dress warmer, and somehow he instantly became an angel in her eyes. Masamune wonders what brand of acid she's on since he was still pregnant and ugly 3 years ago. However, when you and the guys buy the story, Masamune pulls Neko away to talk privately. On the way, Neko warns Masamune to slow down when she suddenly collapses and bleeds from the mouth. Masamune starts to panic, but when he helps her up, a ketchup pack falls and the jig is up. Neko assures him that at least the brand uses natural ingredients, but Masamune barely controls the urge to tape her mouth shut. He asks why she would tell such a lie when he doesn't know her, so Neko asks him to keep the truth a secret between them, even if he doesn't remember her. Masamune almost wavers at how cute she is, but when he remembers his burning hatred for Aki, he rejects Neko and tells her he has someone he likes. Neko tears up but starts asking questions about his crush. When Masamune reveals that it's one-sided, Neko asks to see who it is, so they go up to the classroom and Masamune points her out, thinking Neko will give up when she sees how beautiful Aki is. However, Neko whispered that she wouldn't be a problem and walked right up to her to introduce herself. Masamune rushes to stop her, but before he can, a student opens a window and the wind blows Neko's skirt up, causing Masamune and Aki to realize she's going commando. After, Neko turns to Masamune and explains that she's just very conscious of her health down there, but before Masamune can process what madness this is, Aki gets up and storms out of the class. Masamune chases after her and tries to explain that he doesn't know her, so he grabs Aki, but when she tries to break free, she ends up sucker punching a teacher who catches them for skipping. Thanks to this, the teacher sentences them to clean the pool after school. After school, Masamune and Aki resume their cleaning duties, but Aki warns him to stay away from her. Masamune gets pissed off by her irritating attitude, so he grabs a hose and sprays her with it, claiming it was an accident. Aki then takes off her jacket and Masamune stares at her lack of plot. Suddenly, he notices her struggling with a bucket of water as she explains she was planning to accidentally spill it on him. Masamune reminds her he isn't wearing a swimsuit, so she gets his underwear wet, so Aki tells her he can go commando with Neko. Suddenly, Aki loses her balance and falls into the pool, and as she struggles, Masamune realizes the idiot can't swim, so he jumps in after her. Once he gets her to safety, Aki reminds him that he didn't want to get wet, so Masamune says that his body kind of moved on its own. When Aki figures it was no more than that, Masamune insists that if he said it was because he liked her, she wouldn't believe him, so he apologizes for overstepping. Masamune wonders why he's feeling so annoyed by it when Aki suddenly asks him to prove it. When Masamune asks what it would take, Aki tells him to kiss her. Meanwhile, Yoshino waits in the sun because Aki is late. Suddenly, Neko shows up and asks if she knows where Masamune is. Yoshino wonders why Neko is asking her, so Neko says she figures she'd be the best person to ask, but Yoshino insists she doesn't know where he is. Back at the pool, Aki insists that kissing is the least he should be able to do if he likes her, but Masamune freezes as this would ruin his plan for the grande finale. In his vision, Aki would tell him she loves him and go for a kiss, but he would refuse her and walk away with his mission accomplished. When Masamune remains silent, Aki gets mad and tries to leave, so Masamune pulls her close. He then decides to picture her as a piece of meat and figures it would be easier than looking at her face, but when he goes in for the kiss, Aki sucker punches him. Masamune demands to know what that was for, so Aki gets shy, but Masamune demands an explanation. Just then, Ta and other members of the swim team show up and ask why they're there, so Masamune explains that they were doing their punishment when they decided to splash right in. Ta buys the story and Masamune is glad to have dodged one more bullet, so Ta tells him she's there for swim practice and wishes him good luck with the cleaning. After Aki exits the pool and says that she accepts that he loves her, but she then asks him so what and walks away, leaving Masamune infuriated. Later, Masamune wonders what Aki's problem is since she asked for the kiss when Neko walks up and says she's been looking for him. When Masamune says he doesn't have the energy to hang out, Neko pulls out a bottle and pours him a hot drink to help. Curious, Masamune takes a sip and is surprised it's salty, so Neko explains that she put in the best ingredients to help with dehydration. Masamune likes the drink and takes more, so Neko starts ranting about which vitamins and nutrients are important for the body. Masamune says he prefers using exercise and diet before turning to medicine, so Neko agrees that it's ideal and pouts. He then asks what she likes about him, thinking he can turn the situation to his advantage. Since this was the difficult question Aki asked him, he can't wait to tell Neko off when she gives a superficial answer because she doesn't really know him. However, Neko tells him she likes that he's so modest, he doesn't realize his own charms. Masamune is surprisingly rizzed up, so Neko tells him to be more confident since he's a lovely person and walks away. Masamune realizes she's tougher than he thought, so he wonders if he needs to be as unreasonably bold as she is. Meanwhile, Yoshino secretly watches Neko, hoping to cut her down from the roots because she's too dangerous. She then follows her to a neighborhood where she loses her trail. There, Neko's butler asks Yoshino what she wants with Neko, so Yoshino switches to airhead mode. Neko comes out and says Yoshido is an acquaintance of hers who works for Aki. But when Yoshido insists she doesn't know anything, Neko tells her to drop the charade. Yoshido then asks why she's so obsessed with Masamune, so Neko says he saved her in the past, but Yoshido doesn't buy it. Later, Masamune heads home planning to use Neko's line on Aki. However, when he goes in, he hears more noise than usual and is shocked to find Neko and Yoshina cooking with his micro-mom. Masamune concludes he must have entered the wrong house, but he remembers his lowly mommy is there, so he has no choice but to accept it. He immediately grabs Yoshino and heads upstairs to ask what the heck is going on. It turns out that Masamune's mom had found the girls in the neighborhood, and when she noticed they went to the same school as him, she forced them to go inside with her. Masamune apologizes for his mom's thick and empty skull, but tells Yoshino they should leave while he hides the evidence of his fat past. Yoshino points out that his room made it obvious he only thought about working out, so Masamune insisted that he couldn't take breaks on the way to being a hot stud. Just then, Neko walks into the room and calls it amazing for rehabilitation, but Masamune quickly pushes her out and asks what she needs. Neko then tells him the food is ready. When he goes downstairs, he sees they're all bathed in calories again. There, Masamune's sister says she's surprised he'd actually let his friends come over, and when Neko asks why, the little tattletale almost blows his secret about his past as a person of calorie. Masamune then changes the subject to keep his sister's mouth shut, and his mom suggests they all eat. Masamune picks off the bread on his shrimp just as Neko pulls out a ton of medication to take before eating. Lowly Mummy tells them they're supposed to enjoy their meals, but Masamune laments that calories are a problem, while Neko insists that nutrients are important. Thankfully, Lowly Mummy has no problem with Yoshido, who is willing to stuff her face. Chanatsu then suggests setting off some fireworks after, and the girls agree to the idea. Moments later, Chanatsu wears a yukata as she sets off the fireworks, so Masamune is at least grateful she got Neko to leave the house. Yoshino tells Masamune she isn't fond of fireworks because Aki had once used her as a guinea pig to test how many rocket fireworks they need to fly to the moon. Masamune feels bad for her, so he sets up some calming snake fireworks for her to watch. He then spots Neko helping Chanatsu with her yukata and can't help but notice how cute she looks. Neko joins him and says she's never had such a fun time. Then Lowly Mummy brings out some watermelon as a snack. Chanatsu suggests they have a melon spitting contest, so Yoshino joins them, and Neko laughs at how ridiculous they look. Masamune realizes they could have had a different relationship if Neko wasn't such a liar and he didn't want revenge on Aki. Later, Neko changes upstairs when she comes across Masamune's room again. When she's done, Masamune sees her off and hopes she never comes back. Then he asks Yoshino if she needs him to walk her home. Yoshino reminds him that it would give Aki the wrong idea, so he walks her to a main road where she can get a taxi. There, Yoshino warns Masamune not to get caught up in Neko's plans. Meanwhile, as Neko heads home, she holds up the picture of chubby Masamune and insists they're more alike than he thinks. Some days later, the students rejoice as it's officially the beginning of summer vacation. Just then, Aki storms into the class and slams a flyer on Masamune's desk, asking what he's trying to pull by inviting her to the beach. Masamune figures that since they won't have any classes for 40 days, he'll go with a power play approach, thanks to what he learned from Neko. However, Aki tells him she already has plans to stay at their island villa and invites Shuri instead. But since Shuri is a spineless bottom, he insists that he doesn't want to go unless Masamune is with him. Masamune uses this to his advantage and insists they're a package deal, so Neko takes a page out of his book and insists on going if Masamune goes too. Out of nowhere, Tae says she'd love to join them, so Masamune asks Aki if she'd rather take all of them or spend her time on her private beach alone. Annoyed, Aki thinks it through and agrees. Some days later, the group heads to the island on a ship, so Yoshino approaches Masamune when he's alone. She explains that she's been researching Neko, but can't find any dirt on her, so she doesn't know why she's obsessed with him. Masamune didn't know what to make of this, but he assured Yoshino that his only goal was to get revenge on Aki so Neko wouldn't be a problem. However, Yoshino isn't convinced, so she warns that if he doesn't do something about Aki on the trip, she'll tell Aki everything. Later, the group arrives at the villa and are blown away by how amazing it looks, but Masamune is too busy wondering if Yoshino will really blow his cover. Aki tells the guys that her father's secretary, Yusaki, will be their chaperone and had arrived ahead of them. Meanwhile, Yusaki was getting dumped by her long-term situationship for being slightly bipolar and kind of a nutjob. Just then, the maid announces that Aki has arrived, so Yusaki heads out to meet her, thinking she's the only one who can comfort her. However, when she steps out to greet the girls, she notices Masamune and asks Aki what a boy is doing there. Masamune realizes he has no time to waste, and since Aki likes to look good in front of other women, he blurts out that he's dating Aki. Aki tosses her suitcase at him and warns him not to spew lies that would shock the devil, but Yusaki tells Aki that it's a good thing she's grown out of her man-hating phase. She praises her on choosing a hot boyfriend and suggests it might help with the lack of development on her chest. At this, Aki plays along and says she didn't want to make a big deal out of it. She then pulls Masamune inside. Aki scolds Masamune for putting her in a tough situation, but Masamune is grateful he read the situation correctly and the hot secretary played along. Aki then tells Masamune that the arrangement is for when they're on the island and warns him not to take the act too far. Later, Masamune shows off his abs to impress the girls, but everyone is more focused on Tao's dive into the ocean. Masamune is glad that Shuri didn't wear a bikini to the beach, but Shuri insists he's a boy, at least on the outside. Neko then grabs Masamune and asks him to reapply her sunblock, but Masamune worries that his progress with Aki would be ruined if she saw him staring at Neko's melons. Suddenly, Aki breaks them apart and tells Neko to stop playing cheap tricks on her boyfriend. She then points out that if Yusaki were to spot them, she'd think Masamune was a cheating scumbag and Neko was the one getting played, which wouldn't look good for her family. Neko agrees to back off, so Aki grabs Masamune and pulls him somewhere private for boyfriend duties. Once they're completely alone, he wonders if she wants to get wet without water. But Aki actually tells him to get some food from Yuzaki, since there's no point pretending when no one can see them. Annoyed, Masamune heads back to the house, determined to find something to push his plan one step further. He then finds Yuzaki and gets her to make lunch for Aki. There, Masamune asks if there are any fun locations on the island, so Yuzaki begins to list clubs and lounges they could try, but Masamune asks her to keep the suggestions PG Yuzaki, then suggests a test of courage, and when Masamune remembers how bad Aki is with scary stuff, he figures it's the perfect plan. After, Masamune thanks her and heads out, but when he leaves, Yuzaki's true intentions of ruining Aki's chance at love leak out. In the year she was first hired by the Adagaki family, she had just been dumped by yet another suitor who didn't do well with Crazy, when she heard Aki crying on a bench close by. Yuzaki asked what happened to the donut-shaped boy she had been playing with, so Aki explained that he had left her and insisted she didn't need anyone like him again. Ever since then, Yuzaki enjoyed watching Aki head down the man-hating, dark path, which is why she now hated the idea of her loving a hunk like Masamune. That night, the group arrives at an abandoned house where only Ta looks suspiciously happy to be there. Masamune holds up paper slips to determine how they go in, so the group gets assigned numbers 1 through 6. After, Masamune watches happily as Yoshino goes in, knowing that the starting order had been completely rigged so that Aki would be too scared to move and he'd be the next to go in and save her. In his fantasy, she'd want him to be her boyfriend forever, and she'd cue the kiss. Later, inside the house, Yuzaki waits patiently for Masamune, hoping to scare him with her Joe's face mask so that Aki would see how pathetic he is and fall out of love with him. Suddenly, a psycho with a hockey mask and a chainsaw appears and starts chasing Yuzaki's ghost face. Yuzaki then runs past Aki, who collapses in fear. When Masamune arrives, he wonders who the ghost-faced menace is, but when she screams, he realizes it's Yuzaki. Yuzaki continues on her scared rampage as she bolts out of the house, not wanting to die so no one finds out how old she really is. However, she suddenly runs into Neko, who seems to be bleeding from the mouth again, so she runs the other way and ends up slamming into a street pole. Later, Yuzaki wakes up to find Masamune carrying her. There, Masamune apologizes for getting her involved in his schemes as he admits that he and Aki aren't really dating. Yuzaki realizes Masamune is a good kid after all, so Masamune tells her not to tell Aki she knows. Later, as they return to the mainland, Yoshino approaches Masamune and commends him on having a decent plan for once. She figures Neko should finally get the message, so she agrees not to tell Aki, but warns him not to let his guard down. Some days after, Masamune tortures himself with his usual workout routine when he suddenly gets a call from Aki. Later, he meets with Yoshino and tells her that Aki wants to hand him some of the luggage he forgot on the island in person. When Masamune starts getting smug, Yoshino warns him to think more carefully about this, as one single mistake might set him back further. After, Masamune heads back home to do some homework when he realizes his hog-shot picture is missing. He then remembers the other day when Neko came over and figures she must be responsible. The next day, Masamune thanks Aki for returning his stuff in person, so she explains that she would have delivered it, but Yuazaki started asking too many questions. Akigi then warns Masamune that he'll regret it if he continues to get close to her, which reminds him of how she used to be years ago. Suddenly, he realizes that Neko should be able to tell that the girl in the picture is Aki and the potato with eyes is him. Aki tries to make conversation with Masamune, but he's too busy wondering why Neko would steal his picture and not say anything about it. Just then, Aki snaps at Masamune that she'll be happy to leave since it's such a bother for him to talk to her. After being left behind, Masamune realizes this was exactly the kind of thing Yoshino had warned him about, so it wouldn't be a good idea to leave things as they are. Just then, he gets a call from Neko, who says she's currently alone at home, so he asks if he can come over. Later, Masamune arrives outside her apartment and Neko excitedly welcomes him in. Masamune freezes up when he realizes this would be his first official time inside a girl's apartment, but he mans up and enters. Inside, Masamune sees how impressive the apartment is, so Neko casually says it's a secondary residence that her dad uses for work. She then asks what brought Masamune there suddenly, but the idiot hadn't even thought up an excuse for coming over. He claims he was just in the neighborhood, so Neko goes along with it since she's thirstier than a single man on Tinder. Masamune suddenly asks to use the bathroom, so Neko tells him it's at the end of the hall, but instead of going there, he sneaks into one of the rooms, which he figures must be Neko's, thanks to all the pills. When he looks around, he sees a lot of X-rated romance stuff, which would explain why she's not right in the head. Then he finds the exact same manga he uses as a Riz Bible. Suddenly, Neko shows up behind him and asks if the bathroom was too hard to find. She then notices the manga and admits that she had her butler buy the same one after seeing it in his room. Masamune realizes she just admitted to sneaking into his room, so he asks if she happened to take a photo of him too. Neko admits it and pulls the photo out of her pleasure hills, saying she couldn't help herself cause he was so cute. Masamune is shocked to hear this, so he reminds her he looked like a walking meatball, but she grabs his hand as she tells him there's nothing wrong with being on the heavy side. At that point, Masamune lets his guard down completely, and she kisses him. When Masamune doesn't resist, she pushes him into baby-making position, assuring him that her butler will be away all day. Masamune starts to wonder if his revenge matters anymore, but when he remembers all the cruel things Aki did to him, including the final straw where she named him Pig's Foot, he gets even more pissed. At that point, he tells Neko that he got bullied for being a fatso with a bad personality and people only got close to him because he was rich. He then points out that Neko couldn't possibly like him genuinely, so he wouldn't want to go further with someone who's not serious. Masamune grabs the picture and starts to leave, so Neko asks if he's choosing Aki, to which Masamune reveals that it's his revenge. After, Masamune feels horrible, while Neko cries alone in her room. The next day, Masamune meets up with the group looking like he was chewed on and spat out. Shuri points out that he seems to have lost weight again, but Masamune shrugs it off. Shuri then says the only person left is Neko, so Masamune worries about how awkward it would be to see her, but Tai informs the group that she's not coming. The group heads into the park and everyone has a great time except Masamune, who still feels horrible. Later, he meets with Yoshino and she tells him Aki was in some corner gobbling ice cream like her life depended on it. She then asks why he and Aki seem to be acting strange, but Masamune vaguely remembers Aki getting pissed. When the rest of the group catches up, they begin to head home when Neko's butler drives up and heads straight for Masamune. She tells the group that Neko has gone missing and asks Masamune what he did to her since she wasn't in the apartment that morning. Masamune wonders what the big deal is till the butler reveals that she left all her seizure control medicine behind. Masamune asks if she's sick, so the butler points out that no normal person would need all the medicines she takes, causing Masamune to remember all the weird things Neko would do and realize it was not an act. He then figures she deceived them on purpose so they wouldn't think she was weak. The butler asks Masamune what he did to her since she knows he was at the apartment the day before. The whole group is shocked, including Aki, so Masamune explains that he formally told Neko he couldn't go out with her because he chose Aki. However, everyone ignores Masamune's dramatic confession and starts brainstorming ways to find Neko. Aki suggests the butler take them closer to the apartment, then she tells anyone who can't fit in the car to go with Masamune since he obviously knows where the apartment is. The rest of the group heads for the car, so Yoshino tells him she can't believe he went to Neko's apartment and joins them in the car too. Masamune can't believe he mattered so little to Aki, but he decides to focus on Neko instead. Meanwhile, the rest of the group searches the area close to her apartment, but after hours of looking, Yoshino informs Masamune that they still haven't found her. At this, Masamune figures there's still one place left to look and ends up at their school, where he happens to run into Aki again. Masamune almost thinks he's dreaming, but her flat chest and potty mouth bring him back to reality. Masamune explains that since she traveled by car, school was the only place she would know well, but Aki says she already looked everywhere with no luck. Just then, Masamune asks why she goes so far for Neko if she didn't like her, so Aki admits that she doesn't but claims that she feels bad for her since it's sad to have the person you like look the other way. Hearing this, Masamune wonders why Aki herself would brutally reject the poor simps who would worship the ground she walks on and give them awful nicknames. Since this was basically what she did to him all those years ago, Masamune turns and asks Aki if she remembers the nickname Pig's Foot, determined to tell her the truth. However, before Aki can respond, Masamune gets hit in the head by a paper plane, and they notice others coming from the roof. Masamune immediately remembers Neko telling him about her favorite part of the manga. He starts running toward the school because in the manga, the heroine gets rejected by her crush, so she heads to the roof with love letters and throws them off as airplanes. However, her crush rushes up to stop her just as Masamune does for Neko. Masamune warns her not to do the same thing the heroine did, so Neko admits she doesn't have the strength and passes out in Masamune's arms. When Aki arrives on the roof, Masamune tells her to contact the butler. Later, the group waits in the hospital when the butler comes out and tells them she's stable. She then tells Aki Neko would like to speak to her, which shocks her. While she goes in, Masamune wonders if he did the right thing by rejecting her for his revenge. Just then, Aki interrupts his thoughts and tells him Neko wants to see him too, so he heads to her room and she cheerfully suggests they talk about the past. In her previous school, all the girls were impressed by her, so one of them invited her to their villa that weekend and Neko happily accepted the invitation. The girl excitedly mentioned riding horses and playing tennis, but the other girls informed her that Neko was too frail to try such activities, which made Neko sad. Later, Neko's grandfather told her of a surgery she could try to help her condition, so Neko agreed to do it on the condition that she'd get to fall in love first. In the present, Masamune asks why she chose him in particular, so Neko claims she just randomly picked his picture from the list she had of possible suitors. Masamune insists that he never heard about being anyone's potential suitor, so Neko points out that it's not strange for rich families to pimp their kids out in secret. Masamune figures it would explain why Yoshino didn't find anything out from her research, so he asks Neko how it was to try falling in love. Neko says she thought he and Masamune were exactly alike since he also talks about love for the purpose of his goal, but the truth was actually shallow and empty, which is why her feelings didn't reach him. However, she insists she has no regrets since she got to experience one-sided love and the pain of rejection. She then tells him she'll be going somewhere far and thanks him for the memories. Meanwhile, as the girls wait, Tae confesses to Yoshino that she used to like Masamune too, but Yoshino's only surprised that she thinks this is news. Tae says she doesn't regret hiding her feelings since she gets to hang out with them, but she wonders how Aki feels about Masamune. Yoshino explains that Aki is just sad that her stomach has reached its limit again, but when she looks closer, she realizes something else might be making her sad. Just then, Masamune returns from the room, so Aki rushes to talk to him, but Masamune simply walks past her and leaves. Later, the butler informs Neko that the group has left and asks if she's really okay with letting Masamune go, so Neko says she is as she holds up another picture. Years ago, Neko was also built like an Oreo, so their families thought it would be cute to take a picture together, which is when she first met Masamune. Meanwhile, Masamune walks home and admits that he couldn't trust Neko because he knew something was strange about her, so he figures that's where he'll end up with Aki too. However, Masamune refuses to waver and insists on making Aki look his way so he can throw her away in the best way possible. At the same time, Aki goes outside her mansion to think, so she remembers her talk with Neko, who told her Masamune was being completely sincere and asks what reason she could have to reject him. At this, Aki begins to wonder if she should like him too, but she can't bring herself to show affection for such a dummy like Masamune. She then remembers her time with the round boy from her memories and insists that it was real love. Meanwhile, at Masamune's house, Masamune packs a bag to return to training so he can carry out his original plan. He walks out of the house determined while Chenatsu wonders what's wrong with him. Back at the mansion, Aki suddenly sees a stranger in the shadows, but when the person gets closer, she thinks it's the fatso of her dreams. After their reunion, fake Masamune hands the master of the house a letter from his grandfather, which states an agreement with the Adagaki family for him to marry Aki. Upon hearing this, Yoshino immediately dials Masamune, but his phone has no service since he's busy getting ripped to the middle of nowhere. Days later, the students return to school and Aki returns to cooking simps who dare confess their love to her. After, she reunites with her lackeys, Sonoka and Kikuna, who asks if she should really have turned down the ace of the baseball team. However, when Aki insists he was just a musclehead, the girls praise her for being a cold-hearted witch who ruthlessly gives everyone a no. Aki points out that she did it all the time anyway, so their third friend Mary shows up and points out that she'd been spending more time with Masamune than she did with them, shocking the other girls. Aki tries to defend herself when fake Masamune shows up. The girls wonder how dumb he could be to approach the Wicked Witch of the West while being shaped like a marshmallow. But when Aki says she wouldn't mind spending time with him, the girls share a heart attack. Afterward, Aki suggests they go and complete his transfer paperwork, so they walk off, leaving the girls to wonder where in the multiverse they're in. There, Mary suggests that they had Aki wrong the whole time and she was actually just a chubby chaser. Meanwhile, Masamune struts into class, feeling good when he spots Neko and wonders what she's doing there. They step outside, and Neko explains that she already had the surgery and recovered in the hospital for over a month, so she was able to return to school. She then asks Masamune how much closer he's gotten to Aki, but Masamune confesses he was training the whole time and gearing Neko. Just then, Neko spots Aki with a person of calorie and warns him that he'll lose his chance if he waits too long. However, when Masamune sees the plot of land the guy calls his stomach, Masamune assures Neko Tubby couldn't possibly rival him. Later, after class, Shuri asks Masamune if he'd like to walk home together, but Masamune leaves to hand Aki his gift from the countryside. However, when he arrives at her class, he sees the walking throw pillow hobbing her up again. Masamune wonders who the guy is, so he introduces himself as Kanetsugu, the new transfer student. When Masamune introduces himself, Kanetsugu explains that his nickname is also Masamune, so he tells Aki not to call him that at school so it's not confusing. Masamune then asks if he's a relative of Aki, but Kanetsugu explains that all 600 pounds of him is betrothed to her. Upon hearing this, Masamune immediately drags Yoshino to the storage room and asks how no one told him about this. Yoshino tells him she tried to, but she couldn't get through to him. Masamune asks if he might be lying, but Yoshino says she ran a signature analysis and the letter seems to be real, so he's a guest at their mansion. Masamune wonders how the cruel princess could be okay with this, so Yoshino says she's just a surprise and wonders if it's love. After, Masamune goes to collect intel on Kanetsugu, who's surprisingly good at sports even though he could easily be mistaken for the soccer ball. Kanetsugu was also smart and managed to blend in with boys and girls and somehow got Aki to turn red from his presence. After school, Yoshino tells Masamune that Aki had met him in the past, but Masamune can't understand why she'd like his fat cheeks when she tortured him for the same reason. At this, Yoshino suddenly apologizes to Masamune, so he wonders what has gotten into her too. Meanwhile, Sonoka, Kikune, and Mary meet up to discuss how unfortunate it is that their queen mother has been tainted by boy cooties. However, to their surprise, Kanetsugu walks up and asks if he can join them. Kikune immediately grabs her sword and attempts to whack him with it, but he quickly tells the girls he has something to tell them. Back at school, Ta holds a class meeting for a festival idea for the class. She then suggests they do a Snow White play with Masamune as the prince and Shuri as Snow White. Shuri tries to ask why he's the princess, but the whole class ignores him and agrees to the plan. However, all Masamune cares about is doing something about the Kanetsugu. After the meeting, Masamune spots Aki walking down the hall, so he does the wall slam on her and insists they need to talk. Aki gets up close and personal and tells him that his fly is open. So Masamune rushes to check, allowing her to walk away. Just then, Kanetsugu shows up, so Aki suggests they head to class together, leaving Masamune tweaking in the hallway while the Powerpuff Girls watch. They decide to stick to their plan to protect Aki and help Kanetsugu because during their conversation with them, Kanetsugu had insisted that Aki was too much of a goddess for him to lay a hand on her. When the girls hear that he never intends to kiss or touch Aki, they figure it's a better choice than Masamune, who would gladly pluck Aki's flower. Later, the student council meets to decide on the festival events, and Sonaka happens to be the vice president. When she discovers that Aki's class and Masamune's class have both decided to act a Snow White play, she insists they approve the play from Aki's class. Later, one of the members breaks the news to Ta, who insists it's unfair since they turned in their idea first. She rushes to confront the council members, but Mary tells her that Snow White will be acted by Aki and Kanetsugu. Masamune runs up just as Aki shows up and says it's futile for the lead roles to be acted by men. Aki and Ta continue to argue and Kanetsugu shows up and tells Aki to be more considerate of Ta's feelings, which she agrees to. Angered, Masamune suggests they hold both plays and have people decide on the best project. Ta and Aki agree to the idea, so the student council approves it, making it an official competition. Masamune then pulls Kanetsugu aside and suggests that whoever wins will get to dance with Aki at the post-festival party, so the Round Prince agrees. The day before the festival, Tae chews out Shuri for being stiff with his acting, asking how he calls himself a girl, so Shuri runs off, screaming that he's not a girl, at least on the outside. When he reaches the hallway, he bumps into Neko, who tells him she just finished making their costumes and tells him to come back as quickly as he can. After she leaves, Neko realizes that she doesn't treat him like a girl, so he starts to see her in a new light. Meanwhile, Masamune tries to lure Shuri out with pudding when Kanetsugu shows up and tells him Aki gets really happy when he gives her sweets on their breaks too. Masamune gets annoyed as Kanetsugu mouths off about how to get a girl's favor instead of a cheesy wall slam in a magazine. Masamune wonders who Kanetsugu is to be giving love advice when he can't see his toes, so Kanetsugu wishes him luck and confidently walks off. Masamune determines to be the one who dances with Aki at the party, but first he notes down that sweets are good and wall slams are bad. Meanwhile, the power-drunk girls devise a plan to make sure Masamune doesn't win, so Mary tells them she'll take care of things. Later, Kanetsugu walks home with Aki and tells her he ran into Masamune earlier. When Aki gets irritated, Kanetsugu apologizes for overstepping, so Aki tells him he's always been kind. She then spots a food truck and runs off to buy a snack, and as Kanetsugu watches her, he admits to himself that he has his reasons for deceiving Aki. Since his family has been poor for several years, they had tasked him with improving his family's situation, so he met with Yusaki, who assumed he must be the same land whale Aki was close to. Now, Kanetsugu figured Masamune wouldn't be a problem, but worries about the real fatso he's impersonating. Meanwhile, Masamune begins to sneeze while he works out, so Chainatsu calls for their mom and says Masamune has caught a cold. Immediately, lowly mommy runs out and wraps Masamune in a warm blanket so he doesn't get worse. The next day at the festival, the entire school is bubbling with excitement while the students wonder who will win between the designated bottom and the cruel princess. During assembly, Shuri worries that Masamune has caught a cold, but he assures them he's in top shape even though he isn't. The night before, the idiot had gone up the roof to prove to his mom that he was healthy, but it backfired spectacularly. However, he refuses to give up, so he doesn't lose go walking chicken leg. Just then, Neko shows up and suggests they look around the festival together, but she ends up driving him to the nurse's office. When they sit, Neko explains that since she's been sick for years, she can tell by a touch if someone has a fever, so she tucks him into bed to get some rest. Even though she'd rather have him lose so he doesn't dance with Aki, she tells him she wouldn't do anything to betray their classmates. When she offers to be his dance partner out of pity if he loses, Masamune tells her he'll be counting on her. After, Neko heads out to buy a warm drink while Kikuna hides by the door. Meanwhile, Aki gets changed with the rest of the girls when she notices there's a lot of space in the chess department. Mary happily offers to pad her up and starts stuffing them in when Kanetsu accidentally walks in. The girls stone him with their accessories, so he wonders where he can get change when he spots one of their students in their costume who offers to lead him to a good spot. Meanwhile, Shuri wonders how he can be more like Masamune since that's who Neko likes, so he plans to try sounding manlier. When he spots her, he decides to try it out but ends up sounding like a cowboy, which only confuses her. After, they head back to the nurse's office and find Masamune's bed empty, so they rush to ask Ta if she had seen Masamune, but she hadn't either. At this, Neko reveals that they can't find Masamune anywhere in the school. Meanwhile, Masamune finds himself tied up in a large blanket while Kikuna warns him not to try anything funny. When Masamune confronts her about kidnapping him, she tells him to build up enough muscle so she can't carry him around like a little girl. Back in the hallway, Tae asks Neko if she had any luck finding Masamune, but neither of them know where he is. Shuri comes to join them with no luck either, but he tells them he kept running into class everywhere. Back in the room, Masamune asks Kikuna what she intends to do with him, so she tells him she just needs him to stay put till Aki and Kanetsugu finish dancing. When Kekin blames him for making a move on Aki, he realizes she's trying to keep him from the play. Meanwhile, Shuri tells the girls that Aki's class is about to start their play, but they are panicking as if they had an accident. Meanwhile, Mary overhears Yoshino tell Aki that they can't find Kanetsugu anywhere, so Aki wonders if her fat crush is about to disappear at the most important moment again. Yoshino steps out to tell Masamune that she had successfully kidnapped Kanetsugu, and she realizes the same thing must have happened to him. Meanwhile, Kikume warns Masamune to stay away from Aki after this, but when Masamune insists she has no right to say that, she decides to tell him how she became her bodyguard. A year ago, there was a guy in her dojo who would resort to cheating, making him the only guy she couldn't beat. But after practice, he changed to ask a girl out, which turned out to be Aki, who cut him down with her words. Kikume explains how she then saw Aki as a true hand of justice from then on, but Masamune points out that Kikume is now resorting to the cowardly method by trying to win by default. Kikuna freaks out as she sees his point, so she untees Masamune when she suddenly gets a call from Mary, who asks to speak with Masamune. Mary tries to declare their match a draw, promising to release him if he releases Kanetsugu. When Masamune figures out Yoshino must be behind it, he tells Mary he'd rather stay put since Eki's play is scheduled first, so he hangs up, knowing this would be checkmate. On the other hand, Mary curses Masamune and his unborn children when Aki runs up to ask if there's any sign of Kanetsugu. When she hears there isn't one, she insists that she'll perform the play even without a prince. Back in the makeshift prison, Kikune gets a text from Mary asking her to join the search for Kanetsugu, so she thinks Masamune must have tricked her and starts attacking. Masamune quickly opens the window, allowing Shuri and Ta to see him, so he pretends to jump, causing Kikune to jump out and land in the fountain, while Masamune holds onto the window. After, Masamune tells them how he was kidnapped but figures they'll be fine since the other class will have to cancel their play. However, when Shuri breaks the news that they've already started their play, Masamune runs over there wondering what Eki is thinking. When Masamune arrives at the play, he's surprised to see how much more professional their play looks. He then notices Neko beside him, who asks if he thinks they can win, but Masamune admits that their entire cast is on another level. Mary shows up and reveals they don't have a replacement, so Masamune asks why they let Eki go on without a prince. Mary then tells them how Aki spoke to the rest of the cast and convinced them their efforts shouldn't go to waste. This shocks Masamune while Mary cries that the play would be ruined if they can't find Kanetsugu by the end of it. At this, Masamune realizes he has to tell Yoshino to let Kanetsugu go, but when he sees her on stage as an elf, he collapses as there's no way he can get to her. Suddenly, he thinks of a way to save the play and asks Neko for help, so she runs off quickly. Moments later, Masamune goes backstage and makes a crazy suggestion to Mary to save the play. Meanwhile, the play reaches the point where Snow White needs a prince to kiss her back to life. Aki thinks no one is coming and thinks it's a realistic ending as she remembers the bouquet of flowers she found outside her window all those years ago. But even though she waited and waited, her prince never came. Suddenly, Masamune walks on stage in costume, making everyone wonder what's going on. In his previous conversation with Mary, she had reminded him that their classes were enemies, but Masamune explained that he didn't think their production deserved to be destroyed, so his action was genuinely for the sake of art. Now on stage, Masamune tries to buy the elves some time to get with the program, so they finally take the hint and welcome him as the prince, but Masamune ends up tripping. The elves rush over to help him while Mary wonders why the prince is so weak. Kikuna then shows up and explains that Masamune's fever must be pretty high, so he isn't intentionally trying to ruin the play. Just then, Masamune manages to stand and tries to walk over to Aki, but when he starts to stumble, Yoshino gives him a final push and threat for him to get the job done. Masamune figures he just needs to say his final line and kiss her, so he tries to find his strength while Aki wonders what's taking him so long to fake a kiss. Masamune then rushes through his lines and kisses Aki, to the shock of the whole theater. Aki punches Masamune's lights out and the curtains close, so the crowd starts cheering while Kanetsugu finally makes it out. The next day, Sonoka announces that Aki's class won the competition, but Masamune and Aki received the awards for Best Hero and Heroine. Tag cries as she laments having to cancel the play because Masamune went to the nurse's office after, so Kanetsugu reminds her that he offered to play their prince, but she rejected him for being a big back. Sonaka then suggests they settle things from the festival with a karaoke battle, so Tate accepts and says the losers will have to pick up the entire tab. The battle begins and the students take turns singing their hearts out. Aki puts on a Grammy-worthy performance and Neko chooses to sing a song about heartbreak. Sonoka notices that Masamune seems to be tense, so she figures it is finally their chance to show Aki how pathetic he really is. When Makaba tries to sneak out, Sonoka and Kikune stop him and insist they hear him sing, so Aki comes to his rescue and tells the girls not to put any pressure on him. Masamune thanks her, but she goes back to her usual self. But when Aki returns, she hears the theme song from her favorite show. Neko then suggests they sing a duet, and for once, the girls have fun singing together, blowing the rest of the group away. Unfortunately, the rivalry returns when they disagree on which character is the best. Finally, it's Masamune's turn to damage some vocal cords, so he decides to give it his all but ends up damaging everyone's eardrums instead. Later, Aki and Masamune sit on a park bench as they wait for Yoshino to finish shopping. Aki asks why Masamune hasn't gone home like everyone else, so he says he'll go home when Yoshino returns since it's dangerous for a girl to be out late by herself, just like the last time. Masamune points out that she never thanked him for that, so Aki tells him that he's the one who goes off and does what he wants like at the cultural festival. She then asks what he wants her to do to thank him. Masamune worries this might be a trap, but he asks for a kiss regardless. Surprisingly, Aki agrees and tells him to close his eyes, so she gets close but ends up stuffing his mouth with her dessert. When he opens his eyes, he sees Yoshino and Aki, who tells him to be grateful she gave him out of her dessert. When she walks off, Yoshino tells Masamune that if he had gone for it instead of waiting, he might have gotten his revenge, and she calls him stupid and walks away. However, Masamune doesn't give up as he plans to make Aki fall in love with him on their class trip to France. That's it for this video. If you want a part 2, comment Masamune's revenge. And if you like anime recaps like this, watch this video over here.